On my birthday, my rich grandpa smiled across the long mahogany table and asked, "So, Claire, how do you spend your $3,400,000 trust fund?" I laughed because I thought he was joking. But he wasn't. His eyes, sharp despite his age, were studying me like I was a puzzle he suddenly didn't recognize. "What trust fund?" I asked. The words slipped out before I could stop them. The room went still, the kind of still that hums in your ears. My mother's smile froze. Uncle Charles reached for his wine glass. Eli looked down at his plate, pretending to be fascinated by his steak. Grandpa frowned, confused. "The one your father set up before he passed," he said, voice dipping into concern. My chest tightened. My father died when I was 5. I remembered his funeral, the way my mother wouldn't let me talk about him afterward. She always said, "He left us with nothing but debt." And I believed her. Now, watching her twist her napkin under the table, I realized something was off. "Vivian," Grandpa said sharply, turning to her, "you did explain everything to Claire, didn't you?" Her tone was light, too light. "Of course, Dad. She knows about the trust. We discussed it years ago." I forced a small smile, but my heart pounded. "Actually," I said, "we didn't." Eli coughed into his napkin. Charles muttered something about accountants. The chandelier light flickered above us like it was listening. My mother leaned toward me, whispering, "Not here, Claire." That whisper told me everything. I pushed my chair back and excused myself, pretending to take a call. My legs felt numb as I stepped into the hallway. The mansion smelled like old wood polish and secrets. Through the crack in the door, I heard Grandpa asking what she meant by "not here." My mother's voice, hushed and brittle, replied, "She doesn't understand finances." That line burned through me. I became the girl they always thought I was, naive, disposable, unworthy of the Donovan name. Standing alone under the portrait of my father, I realized the truth. They'd lied to me for decades. And as I stared at his painted face, I promised him silently that I'd find out exactly what they took, and make them pay for every cent. When everyone left the dining room, laughter echoing faintly down the hall, I slipped away toward my father's old study. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses on your chest. My heels sank softly into the thick carpet as I passed family portraits I could never stand to look at for long. My mother's voice floated faintly from the living room, sweet and fake, entertaining Grandpa like nothing had happened. The study smelled like dust and cedar. My father's books were still lined up neatly on the shelves, untouched since his death. I remembered being small, sitting on his lap while he worked at that desk. Now, standing there as an adult, I felt like I was trespassing in someone else's memories. I ran my hand over the desk drawers, one by one. Most opened easily, empty or filled with papers long forgotten. Then I found the one that didn't budge. The bottom right drawer had a lock. I looked around the room, my pulse thudding hard. My mother's voice got closer, then faded again. I bent down and tugged at the drawer until I saw a tiny keyhole. My father used to keep spare keys behind the bookshelf, taped under the ledge. I checked, and there it was, a small brass key. When I turned it, the drawer clicked open with a soft groan. Inside was a single folder, thick and yellowed, labeled in neat black ink. "See Donovan Trust, active 2005. My hands shook as I pulled it out. I sat down at the desk and flipped through the pages. Legal documents, signatures, account numbers. Everything looked official. The first page hit me hardest. It said my father had created a trust fund for me when I was 5. The amount was clear, $3,400,000. My name printed cleanly across the top. My mother listed as guardian until I turned 21. I stared at it, my eyes blurring. 21 had passed 7 years ago. I never saw a cent. I kept reading, scanning through more paperwork until I found attached bank statements. Each one showed withdrawals, large ones made over the years. I saw my mother's name again and again. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. I flipped faster, my breathing sharp and uneven. There was hardly anything left. The total balance was nearly zero. A cold numbness crept through me. She'd taken it all. Every dollar my father had set aside for my future. The chair creaked as I leaned back, staring at the folder spread open under the dim desk lamp. My mind flashed to every moment she'd told me we couldn't afford things, that I needed to work hard because we didn't have family money anymore. Every word had been a lie. I gathered the documents, folded them back into the folder, and slid it into my purse. My hands still trembled, but my thoughts were clear. Down the hall, I heard footsteps, my mother calling my name softly, pretending to care. I locked the drawer again, replaced the key, and stepped into the corridor before she reached the door. When she smiled and asked, "Where did you disappear to?" I smiled back and said, "Just looking for something I think I finally found." The next morning, I found my mother in the garden, trimming roses like nothing in the world could ever touch her. Sunlight hit the diamonds on her bracelet, the same one she once said she could never afford. My stomach twisted, but I kept my voice calm. "Mom," I said softly, "can we talk?" She glanced up, smiling like always. "Of course, darling. You look pale. Didn't sleep well." I sat on the bench beside her. My hands were cold even though the air was warm. I pulled the folder from my bag and placed it between us. Her smile faded just a little. "Where did you get that?" she asked, still pretending she didn't already know. "Dad's study," I said. "You told me there was no money. You said he left us nothing." Her eyes flickered toward the folder, but she didn't open it. "Claire," she sighed, "you don't understand how hard it was after your father died. Bills, property taxes, lawyers. I had to use what was left." "What was left?" I repeated. "It was $3 million, Mom. $3 million. She set down the shears and looked at me, her face calm, voice low. "It wasn't theft. I used it for the family. For you too, in a way. Keeping this house, keeping the Donovan name alive, that's not cheap." I stared at her, waiting for some trace of guilt. There was none. "You stole from me," I said quietly. Vivian tilted her head, the faintest smile on her lips. "You were a child. You wouldn't have known how to handle that kind of money. And honestly, you've done fine without it. You've built a career, independence. Be proud of that." Her words hit harder than I expected. She sounded almost proud of her deception. I wanted to scream, but I forced myself to stay still. "You made me feel small," I said. "You made me believe I wasn't good enough to be part of this family. And all that time, you were spending what was mine." She brushed a bit of soil from her glove. "Claire, don't be dramatic. Everything I did was for stability. Besides, if I hadn't managed those funds, we could have lost everything. You should be thanking me." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Thank you? For lying to me my whole life." Her eyes hardened. "Watch your tone. I did what I had to do. You'd never understand the responsibility that comes with real money." Something inside me snapped. "You mean the kind that wasn't yours?" For the first time, her face twitched. She stood, gathering her tools, pretending the conversation was over. "I don't like your attitude," she said. "You're being ungrateful." I stood too. "Ungrateful?" My voice cracked. "I worked night shifts to pay rent while you were buying jewelry with my future." She turned away, cold and quiet. "You've had enough drama for one day. Drop it, Claire." But I knew I wouldn't. As she walked back toward the house, I watched her, realizing she wasn't just lying. She believed her lies. And that was worse than theft. I drove straight from my mother's house to the old coffee shop near the hospital where I used to work. It hadn't changed much. Same chipped tables, same quiet hum of people typing. I called Jonah before I lost my nerve. We hadn't spoken in years, not since college, but when he picked up, his voice sounded exactly the same. "Claire? Wow, it's been forever. Everything okay?" "Not really," I said. "I need your help. It's financial. And it's ugly." He met me an hour later, looking tired but kind. Jonah had always been good at reading people. He saw my face and didn't ask small questions. I handed him the folder and told him everything, about my dad, the trust, my mother's lies. He listened without interrupting, scanning through the pages with that sharp, calculating focus he used to have when solving math problems in high school. When he finally looked up, his voice was steady. You weren't supposed to find this, he said. These records go deep. I nodded. Can you find out where the money went? He took a long sip of his coffee. Yeah, but it'll take time. You sure you want to open that door? It's already open, I said. 2 days later, he called me back to his office downtown. His desk was covered with printouts and bank trails. So, he said, pointing at the screen, most of your trust didn't vanish. It was moved. He showed me a diagram connecting names and numbers. My mother's signature linked to a company I'd never heard of, Northline Investments. It was registered under my Uncle Charles. This is a shell company, Jonah explained. No real business, no employees. Just a name used to move money quietly. He clicked another file open. From there, the money was loaned to Eli. Look, real estate projects, all under his name. He's been using your trust as seed capital. I leaned forward, heart pounding. So they built everything off my father's money? He nodded slowly. Pretty much. Your uncle and cousin got rich off what was supposed to be yours. It's technically fraud, but they covered their tracks well. I stared at the numbers on the screen, the millions that used to belong to me. Can I prove it? Yes, he said. But you'd need more than bank statements. You'd need them to admit they knew. I sat back thinking. The hurt I'd felt began to turn into something sharper, steadier. Then I'll make them admit it. Jonah studied me, cautious. Claire, this could get messy. They won't just hand it over. I'm not asking, I said quietly. I'm taking it back. He smiled faintly. You always were stubborn. I looked out the window at the passing cars. Not stubborn, just done being fooled. Jonah leaned forward. If you're serious, I'll help you trace every cent. We'll make a plan. I nodded. We're not just finding it. We're going to use it. They built their empire on lies. I'll make sure it collapses the same way. He tapped his keyboard, opening another file. Then let's begin. A week later, Jonah called me again, his tone serious. I found something new, he said. We met in his office, and he turned his screen toward me. Your grandfather's lawyers are updating his estate. Your mother is pushing for Eli to be named executor. I frowned. Executor? You mean he'd control everything once Grandpa's gone? Exactly, Jonah said. And if that happens, you'll never see a dime. They'll bury everything. I felt my throat tighten. The room felt too small. There has to be something I can do. Jonah pulled up another document and pointed to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. There's a clause in the trust your dad created. It says that if your guardian misused or redirected funds for personal gain, control of the trust returns immediately to you. But to activate it, you need clear proof that your mother knew what she was doing. So I need her confession, I said. He nodded. Exactly. Something written. No guessing, no assumptions. I thought about my mother, how careful she always was, how she never said anything without rehearsing it first. She'd never just admit it outright, unless she believed she was winning. That night, I sat at my laptop, the cursor blinking like it was daring me. I opened a new email. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I needed to sound like her daughter, the guilty, naive one she thought she still controlled. I began typing slowly. Mom, I've been thinking about what you said. I feel awful for accusing you. Maybe I overreacted. I just want peace in the family. If it helps, I'm willing to sign the trust papers back to you. You managed it for years, and I don't want to fight anymore. I reread the message 3 times. It sounded weak, trusting, exactly how she wanted me to be. I pressed send before I could second-guess myself. Then I waited. Hours passed. I walked around my apartment, checking my phone every few minutes. When the notification finally came, my stomach dropped. Her reply was short but coldly perfect. Claire, I'm glad you finally understand. The money was never truly yours to control. I used it for the family, for things your father would have wanted. We both know it went where it needed to go. Let's not dig into old wounds. I stared at the words, my hands shaking. Jonah's voice echoed in my mind. You need written proof. This was it. I forwarded the email to Jonah immediately. He called within seconds. This is gold, he said. It shows she admits to using the money and taking responsibility. That's all we needed. I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time in years, the balance had shifted. My mother's control, her lies, her fake charm, had cracked. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. The game she started years ago wasn't over. But for the first time, I finally knew how to play it. My mother called a week later, her voice smooth and practiced. "Claire, let's start over," she said. "No more fighting. I'm hosting dinner Sunday night. Your grandfather wants everyone together again." I knew it wasn't about peace. She wanted control back. But I agreed, pretending to forgive. That evening, I arrived at the mansion right on time. The air inside smelled of expensive candles and something forced. The dining table glittered with crystal glasses and gold-rimmed plates. My grandfather smiled when he saw me, his eyes tired but kind. My mother greeted me with her perfect hostess grin, brushing my cheek with a kiss that felt cold. "Claire, darling," she said, "I'm glad you could make time for us. I know how busy nurses are." The way she said nurses made it sound like an insult. I smiled politely, sliding my phone under my napkin where it could record everything. Eli poured himself more wine and started bragging about a new development deal. My uncle laughed loudly at every word. My mother kept glancing at me, waiting for a reaction. I stayed quiet. When dessert was served, she leaned across the table. "So, Claire," she said with that sharp sweetness she used when she wanted to humiliate someone, "still working those night shifts? You must be exhausted. All that effort just to pay rent." I met her eyes. "I manage fine," I said. "Money isn't everything." She smirked. "Of course, but some people just aren't built to handle more." That was the moment I'd been waiting for. I took my phone out and opened the email she had sent me, the one where she admitted using my trust fund. Then, with one tap, I mirrored my screen to the big TV behind her. The message appeared in glowing white letters. Her voice faltered. "What are you doing?" "Just showing everyone some family history," I said quietly. The room went still. My grandfather leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "Vivian," he said slowly, "what is this?" No one breathed. Eli cursed under his breath. My uncle dropped his fork. My mother's face lost all color. "Dad, this is out of context," she stammered. "She's twisting things." Grandpa pointed at the screen, his hand shaking. "You took her money? Is that true?" Vivian opened her mouth, trying to find a lie fast enough, but panic made her voice crack. "I had to do it before you changed the will," she shouted. The words hung there, impossible to take back. My grandfather's face hardened. His fork clattered against the plate. "Before I changed the will?" he repeated slowly. "So you planned this?" She realized what she'd said and covered her mouth. No one spoke. Eli pushed his chair back, muttering something and storming out. My uncle just stared down at his plate. Grandpa looked at me, then at her. His voice was quiet but cold. "I want you out of my house." My mother tried to speak, but he slammed his hand on the table. "Out!" I stayed seated, silent, watching her crumble. The truth was finally out, and for the first time in years, I felt free. The silence after my grandfather's outburst felt heavier than the air itself. My mother stood frozen, her face pale and her hands trembling slightly, while my grandfather pushed his chair back, breathing hard. "I never approved any withdrawals," he said, his voice breaking. "Vivian, you told me the accounts were untouched." She tried to step closer, but he raised his hand. "Don't. Not another word." His eyes filled with disbelief. "You used your own daughter's inheritance and lied to me for years." "Dad, please," she said quickly, panic creeping into her voice. "You don't understand. I did it for the family." He slammed his hand against the table. "Don't you dare call this family." His voice echoed through the room. Then, just as suddenly, his breath hitched. He reached for his chest, gasping. "Grandpa!" I rushed to his side as he slumped in the chair. My mother screamed, but didn't move. I grabbed his hand, shouting for help. "Call 911. Eli came running from the hallway, his face pale. He grabbed the phone and started giving the address to the operator. My grandfather's eyes fluttered, his breathing shallow. "Stay with me," I whispered. "Don't give up now." The ambulance arrived fast, red lights flashing across the windows. The paramedics lifted him onto a stretcher. I climbed into the ambulance before anyone could stop me. My mother called my name as the doors shut, but I didn't look back. At the hospital, I stayed beside him, clutching his hand as doctors worked. Hours passed before a nurse told me he'd made it through the worst. "He needs rest," she said softly. I nodded, exhausted but relieved. When I stepped outside, I saw that my mother and uncle weren't there. Eli sat in the waiting room, eyes darting between his phone and the floor. "They're gone," he said quietly. "They left right after the ambulance pulled away. Packed bags. Didn't even say where." I didn't respond. I already knew what they were doing. Later that night, Jonah called. His voice was calm but urgent. "Claire, I tracked some activity. Your mother and uncle started transferring money to accounts overseas. Properties, too. They're trying to disappear with what's left." I leaned against the hospital wall, closing my eyes. "Let them try," I said. "It won't matter." Before coming to the dinner, I had already taken the evidence Jonah helped me gather. The emails, bank records, the trail from the shell companies, and sent it all to the authorities. A full fraud report, every document attached. I'd been waiting for the right moment, and now it was done. "I'm proud of you," Jonah said. "You did everything right." "I didn't have a choice," I replied. "They would have buried everything if I waited." When I hung up, I went back to my grandfather's room. He was asleep, his breathing steadier. I sat beside him, staring at the quiet monitors. My family had always believed they could twist the truth to fit their world. But the world they built on lies was finally falling apart. And this time, I wasn't the one left broken. In the days that followed, the house that once felt untouchable turned into a crime scene. Investigators came early in the morning, carrying boxes and laptops. They went through drawers, filing cabinets, and safes while officers took photos of everything. It felt strange standing there, watching strangers walk through rooms where my childhood had happened. But I didn't stop them. My grandfather was still in the hospital, recovering slowly. When I visited, his voice was faint but steady. "Claire," he said, reaching for my hand. "I'm so sorry for what she did. I should have protected you." I shook my head. "You don't have to be sorry, Grandpa. You didn't do this." He nodded weakly and asked for a pen. With trembling fingers, he signed a document transferring power of attorney to me. "You'll take care of things the right way," he said. The next day, the investigators froze all family accounts. Bank managers called, lawyers showed up, and everything stopped at once. Credit cards, investments, even access to the mansion's funds. My mother and uncle's faces appeared on news updates, their names tied to words like embezzlement and fraud. It was surreal seeing it printed in bold letters. Jonah stayed by my side, handling the paperwork. He explained that the investigators had found connections between my uncle's company and a web of fake accounts across different states. "They didn't just take your trust," he said. "They moved money for years, more than $5 million altogether." At first, Eli refused to speak to anyone. But when the investigators started closing in, his tone changed. He called me one evening, his voice shaking. "Claire, I didn't know how deep it went. I thought it was business loans, that's all." "Then tell the truth," I said quietly. "You still can." He did. The next morning, prosecutors confirmed that Eli had handed over documents linking Vivian and Charles to offshore transfers. He gave them copies of emails and payment records. It was enough to make their entire defense fall apart. Soon after, the police issued formal charges: embezzlement, wire fraud, elder exploitation. Reporters gathered outside the gates of the estate, snapping pictures as boxes of evidence were carried out. The Donovans, once seen as perfect, were now front-page news for all the wrong reasons. I spent most of my time between the hospital and meetings with investigators. My grandfather's health remained fragile, but he smiled whenever he saw me. "You've done what none of them could," he whispered one afternoon. "You told the truth." Inside, I didn't feel proud, just tired. Years of pretending everything was fine had come to an end, and the pieces left behind weren't easy to look at. The mansion felt empty, the silence heavier than ever. By the end of that month, the company named Donovan Holdings was suspended. Assets were seized, accounts frozen, properties flagged. The empire my family built on lies and stolen money collapsed overnight. I stood outside the gates one evening, looking at the house where it all started. It didn't feel like home anymore, just the shell of something built on greed. But for the first time, I could breathe without guilt. The truth had finally done what years of silence couldn't. The trial began on a gray morning that felt colder than it should have. Reporters waited outside the courthouse, cameras flashing whenever anyone with the Donovan name walked by. I kept my head down and walked past them, clutching the small silver locket my father gave me before he died. It reminded me why I was there, to finish what he started. Inside the courtroom, everything smelled like paper and coffee. My mother sat at the defense table in a pale suit, her hair perfectly styled, but she looked smaller somehow. The confidence she used to wear like armor was gone. My uncle avoided looking at me. Eli sat behind the prosecutors, quiet and tense, waiting to testify. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The air felt heavy, filled with quiet anticipation. The prosecutor began by showing the financial records, tracing every transaction Jonah had uncovered. Page after page, it all pointed back to my mother and uncle. Vivian tried to stay calm, occasionally whispering to her lawyer, but her fingers twisted the edge of a tissue until it tore apart. When it was her turn to speak, she stood slowly. Her voice was soft, almost rehearsed. "I never meant to harm my daughter," she said. "My father was old and confused. He often mixed up numbers and accounts. I only did what I thought was best for the family." Her lawyer nodded, encouraging her to continue, but the judge's expression didn't change. The prosecutor asked a few direct questions, and each time, her answers grew weaker. "So you signed the transfer papers yourself?" "Yes." "And you used those funds to purchase property?" "Yes." "And you never told Claire the trust existed?" Her eyes flicked toward me. She wouldn't have understood. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand, my heart beating hard, but my voice stayed steady. I explained how I found the folder, the lies she told, and the way she twisted every memory to make me believe I was less than the rest of them. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just told the truth. The courtroom was silent when I finished. Even the reporters stopped typing. The judge looked through the evidence one last time, then spoke clearly. Vivian Donovan and Charles Donovan are found guilty of embezzlement and fraudulent misappropriation. Restitution in the amount of $3.4 million plus damages is awarded to the plaintiff, Claire Donovan. The gavel struck, sharp and final. Outside, the reporters rushed forward, their microphones flashing under the bright sky. My mother came out behind me, escorted by officers. Cameras surrounded her, and her voice rose above the noise. "She destroyed her own family," she shouted, tears streaking her makeup. "She's ruined everything." I turned once, just enough for her to see me. My voice was quiet, but I knew she heard it. "No, Mom," I said. "You did that all by yourself." I kept walking toward the street, past the shouting, past the cameras, past everything that used to define me. The truth had finally spoken louder than her lies, and for the first time, I didn't have to defend myself anymore. After the court case, life grew quiet again. The reporters moved on to other stories, and the Donovan name faded from the headlines. My grandfather stayed in the hospital for a few more months. I visited often, reading to him and bringing flowers from his garden. One night, he took my hand and said softly, "You did the right thing, Claire." Those were the last words he ever spoke to me. He passed peacefully in his sleep. When the will was read, the lawyer explained that Grandpa had left his remaining estate to me. His note said it was for honesty and decency. The words made me cry more than the money ever could. I decided not to keep the mansion, the cars, or any of the luxury that came with the Donovan name. I wanted something real, something that helped others instead of hurting them. With Jonah's help, I sold everything and opened a small trauma clinic in my father's name. It wasn't fancy, just a few rooms, clean walls, and a staff that cared. We treated people who had nowhere else to go. Every time I walked through the doors, I felt closer to the father I barely remembered. Jonah came by often to check on things. One evening, he stood by the window, watching the lights flicker across the street. "You built something good out of something awful," he said. "Not many people could do that." I smiled faintly. "It doesn't feel like revenge anymore. Just balance." He nodded. "Still, it cost you everything, your family, your name." "Maybe," I said, locking the clinic door behind us. "But it gave me peace." We stood in silence for a while, the air cool and calm. The city sounded distant, like the noise belonged to another world. I looked up at the clinic sign, the Donovan Trauma Center, and felt a strange mix of sadness and pride. My mother once told me that blood is thicker than water. I used to believe her. Now I know the truth. It only stains deeper when it's spilled. That $3,400,000 trust fund wasn't a gift. It was a test, and I was the only one who passed. Do you think I did the right thing by walking away from my family after everything they did? Or should I have given them another chance? I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed my story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more stories like this.